So I'm Amy McClain. I led enablement at the Knot during the 2 years that we're discussing during this panel. So we're really talking about a finite amount of time because obviously the efforts there are ongoing. But before I joined the Knot in May of 23, I was the first enablement hire at Calendly during their time of hypergrowth coming out of COVID. And then I went over to Mode Analytics and led revenue strategy and enablement as we scaled there before they were ultimately acquired by ThoughtSpot. And then I joined the team at The Knot. Ashley and Cass were part of the team that I joined. Ashley, I'll hand it over to you for an intro.
Okay. Well, I'm Ashley Downey. I'm so excited to be here with you all. But I'm just coming out of 9 years at The Knot, actually, where I was director of our global go-to-market enablement. But wanted to share really quickly a little bit about my career path at The Knot because I actually think it's my superpower. So I started in sales there. So got my hands dirty, right? I saw what it was like to actually be on the phone with customers, transitioned into operations. And I would say, like, that's when my mindset really started to shift. My customer was no longer the buyer, they were the seller. And so I became obsessed with making the seller's life a lot easier. And from there, I joined enablement, and it really did feel like such a natural next step for me. And there I led, like I mentioned, our global go to market enablement. So, what does that actually mean? So, ensuring that those teams had their readiness, right? What do they need to do or say differently? And then at the same time, I also led our optimization enablement side of the house. So simplifying processes, removing that stickiness that holds those sellers up. But like I mentioned, I really think that this is my superpower. And it's given me this ability to really see that full seller motion, which I think really helped take us to that level of really being strategic. So excited to be here and can't wait to dive in. And Cass, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassandra Edwards. I'll tell you a little bit about me as well. I joined the Not Worldwide in 2013. Similar to Ashley, I started out as a sales rep. I was making my very first cold calls in my career. And then after about a year, I found my rhythm in sales and really had fallen in love with the impact that we were able to have on small business owners. While I originally thought my career path would lead me into sales management, like many of you, I found my way into enablement somewhat unexpectedly. And I quickly realized it was where I wanted to be. I joined the enablement team in 2015 and have been here ever since. In working alongside Amy and Ashley, my role was to oversee our programs team. This team focuses on work that benefits from a programmatic approach and supports the business horizontally across all of our frontline customer facing teams. Again, I'm so thrilled to be here on this panel and really excited to be alongside Amy and Ashley.
Thank you, ladies. So let's get into it. Well, here we go. All right. So, just to start off with, when I walked into this team that was established, it was already good, right? People were happy with the work that we were doing. So, nothing was broken, but we knew that what got us to this point wasn't going to get us to the global scale that I ultimately knew was the charge. So, we want to set the foundation and talk about where we were in that moment in time. So, Cass, Ashley, why don't you walk us through what the team looked like then?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time, Enablement was a team of 11, as you can see on the slide. And we described ourselves as scrappy, agile, and relevant. And honestly, that wasn't a bad thing at all. It's what the business needed from us in that moment. What we didn't realize yet was that we were actually ready to do more.
I mean, Amy, you said it. Cassie, you just said it. We weren't broken. We all know that phrase, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we definitely had fallen into this very transactional rhythm with our partners. A lot of our weeks looked the same. We joined these weekly reoccurring meetings with our stakeholders, and leaders would come to us with a list of things that they wanted. And we said, okay, great. They said jump. We said, okay, how high? And to Cass's point, like we were happy. We were proud of this. We were responsive. We were helping, and we were really, really busy all the time.
Yeah. I mean, 1,000%, Ashley. Like we were very busy, and a lot of that showed up as like decks and slides as the output. And again, like you said, don't get me wrong, wasn't broken. Who doesn't love a pretty slide? It felt good at that time. It felt like we were supporting sellers and adding value because we were constantly doing things for them.
We had some artifacts to show for the work that we did, right? And that's what we relied on were artifacts.
Yeah, and I think like that word support, like now looking back, like we were in this very much just we were supporting people, but and that's okay. That's not to be a knock to anybody, but we weren't a support function. Our job was to help move the business. And so I think like we had to finally just step back all together as a team and have this oh wow moment, if you will, where we realized that we were order takers and we didn't even know that at all.
I'm kind
And
of
like,
curious.
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Ash.
No, I was gonna say like, I didn't realize that we were order takers, and so like it was tricky to get out of that motion.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I could get some emojis, like thumbs up if you feel like you are an order taker right now in your enablement function. Like who feels like the burden of this? Like that is an easy, we all feel like that at some point or another, or consistently in the enablement function. It's something that we all fall into. And like you said, Ashley, it's once you're there, it's really hard to break out of that. It's really hard to connect your work back to outcomes. We weren't consistently tying enablement yet to any measurable results.
Well,
And
and what I want to challenge
go
you
ahead.
all with here is when I walked in, this wasn't the language that anybody was using, right? Because again, it wasn't broken and we thought we were driving meaningful impact because our stakeholders were happy with the work that we were doing, right? So when I came in and was like, guys, Scrappy, I wouldn't necessarily be proud of Scrappy. Sometimes we've got to be, but that's the opposite. Like if you were to put on a pendulum, you've got Scrappy over here and strategic way on the other side. So it's really hard to do both and do both well. So when I came in, I didn't want to come in flipping tables, right? But I needed to help everybody see that we were needing to go a different way in order to scale. And so first we had to build trust. And it couldn't be like walking in the door and being like, hey, everybody's job's going to look very different. The way that we're working, the new hire onboarding program that I just went through, everybody was really proud of that. But I saw opportunities that if we pivoted what we were doing, we could run one onboarding program for all of the revenue teams, not have a siloed one for new business, separate from account management, separate from our other customer facing roles. So we got
Amy,
it. We had to
can
start
I
with it.
add something there,
Of
Amy?
course. Yeah.
Like, I just think we had our blinders on, right? We were so tunnel vision that we didn't even know. And so that trust piece to help us get those blinders off and like you didn't just say the words of where we needed to go. You helped show us how to get there, but we had to take those blinders off to really see that bigger picture.
But you weren't going to do that for me as the new person to the whole business until we kind of co-created what this looked like. So we did this by rolling out a maturity model. We literally got in a room together and wrote swim lanes on a board, and we all had our sticky notes saying, okay, what's working, what's broken or like needs to be optimized, and then what doesn't exist? What do we need to build? So these were the swim lanes, and we're going to talk through like what our current state was in that moment, and then we co-created this vision of where we wanted to go. So we'll talk first about knowledge and skill. So this is typical training, and the way training looked, um, the first few sessions that I went through was beautiful slide decks, hours on calendars, but they were like optional lunch and learns around like competitive, intel, what we were talking about with our competition. And we couldn't really measure outcomes on that, right? Again, Kirkpatrick level one, we were getting smiley faces. People liked what we were doing and they liked that there was a lot of activity coming out of enablement, but I don't know that we had that measurable impact the way that we were operating with hours on calendars.
Yeah, I agree. And when it comes to like content, Oh my goodness. Let me walk you through what content looked like a couple of years ago. I'm sure many folks on the call can relate, but we kept everything in the Google Suite. We're talking docs, sheets, slides. It sounds fine in theory, but version control basically didn't exist. People would make their own copies, they would stash them in their personal drives, and suddenly we had five versions of the same thing floating around. No one knew what was current, and even if it was current, no one knew like what had changed at what point over time. I remember vividly like when this would happen where someone would like, send me a message and say, "Is this still legit?" And I would open up this document and I'd be like, "Oh my goodness, this hasn't been touched in 3 years." So honestly, I still get goosebumps thinking about it, but where we were living in content chaos. And then if you move down to new hire onboarding, onboarding is something I've spent years either participating in, directly owning, or overseeing. And early on, years and years and years ago, we had built onboarding brick by brick, and it was tailored to whatever team we happened to be hiring at that moment. And that's of course pretty normal, when you're building an enablement function from scratch. It is incredibly manual, and it wasn't built to scale like what Amy is describing. Everything happened in a classroom. It was 8-hour days. It was traditional presentations. Someone's talking at you all day long. And as we started supporting more teams, we built new hire onboarding programs in isolation. That became really, really problematic. At the end of the day, we had multiple onboarding programs running all at the same time, and they all felt and looked completely different one to the next. Because we had a new hire onboarding program every single month, and each one was about 3 weeks long, onboarding became this massive investment of time and energy. And honestly, most of all of our team's calories were spent just keeping it running. I used to tell new hires this is basically a boot camp because it felt like that. It was 15 straight business days of sitting back and learning. And it was just that. It was exhausting.
On any given day, we had 7 of our 11 team members running an onboarding session. And that's too much overhead and capacity to be going into one program. So like that alone was like, hey, we've got to get something going that's different.
And that put us in a place where we couldn't take on more, right? So I talked earlier about these laundry lists that we were getting, but majority of our time was in onboarding, and sometimes one-off onboarding requests came up. And so we're getting these laundry lists. We want to say yes, but we're all at the same time doing onboarding. You can't do more with less, right? I'm going to jump down to systems, tools, and tech here. So as we started doing this transition from reactive to strategic, Amy, I'm going to steal your line here, but we had to get under the hood, right? We had to lift that hood up, and it became really clear that our setup, it was working against the sellers. So if our role is to drive performance, drive numbers, but our system is set up in a way that's working against them, those are at odds. Systems weren't always talking to each other. Information was all over the place. So where is that single source of truth? And some of the workflows just didn't actually line up with how people actually sold. And so what does that lead to? Sellers, reps are left with not even being able to fully focus on that conversation. They're spending so much of their energy just trying to figure out like, what button do I press next? Or what process am I supposed to apply now? It was a lot of tool hopping, guessing, spending time on things that did not move deals forward, right? And that was ultimately our job. And so I really think that that's when something clicked, that this wasn't a talent problem or an effort problem. It's probably a setup problem. And so we had to stop focusing on making those pretty slides and getting that airtime in front of reps and really shift our energy into focusing on the actual seller experience at hand. So instead of asking reps to memorize processes and like hunt for this information, we started building these just-in-time prompts that told our reps what the next best step was in the exact moment that they needed it.
And I think all of that becomes really important as we start working together. We have the systems in line. We've got a single source of truth. This was laying the foundation. So like first we had to name that these were problems to be solved. So until we named the problems to be solved, it was really hard to create our future state vision. So this is what we came up with together. We knew that knowledge and skill needed to measure behavior change. Rather than how many hours of training did we conduct, we started measuring the hours we saved the business. Because if there was a knowledge transfer, we would push it out in e-learning and do a knowledge check. So we knew reps had the new information. When there was a skill, we would push out, introduce the skill in e-learning, and then we would put an hour on the calendar. And what we did was practice. They practiced in a safe space with us. We didn't have them practice in the wild in front of a customer. We weren't going to expect that they were going to go practice in a mirror on their own time. We made sure that they practiced with us. They got application and feedback real time so that then we could actually start tracking the revenue metrics that our sales leader cared about. So everything we did started to align more with the data points that mattered to them. So when we were measuring behavior change, right, then we could start seeing that when we ran discovery in this way, we had a better conversion rate to our next sales stage. So all of that became really critical when we were able to prove that we were saving time, so we were boosting productivity, but also that we were actually changing the way people sold, and we knew that it was working. How did
And
content do that for us, Cass?
in some big ways, but I just have to go back to like when you're talking about, doing these like live presentations, in front of your audience, it's like life happens and like someone is sick that day, you know what I mean? Or someone's out on vacation. And I remember, years ago, like doing something like 6 times over to just like catch up with the folks that like were out sick or were on vacation. And like you're just running these makeup sessions. So that pivot alone just really helped to scale our efforts. And I felt like that was huge. But on content. So again, you remember my description that like content was all over the place. It was chaotic in Google Drive. Once we stepped back, we realized that we had like three pretty simple goals. The first one is like we wanted a single source of truth, one place where people could go to get answers. We wanted real version control, one trusted version of a document, not five. And we wanted transparency. We wanted the ability to have transparency so people could actually see when something was last updated and who owned it, who's like the subject matter expert over that information. So for us, moving to a knowledge management platform, in our case, we chose Guru, it helped us check all those boxes. And it also gave us something even more powerful, and that's data. Like you said, Amy, we were now able to track who's consuming our information, who is actually staying up to date. And that was really powerful. We were able to start reporting out on that. So suddenly we could now take that step forward and report out on the value of our content. We could see things like which information was actually being used, which teams were proficient in the knowledge they needed, and which teams were falling behind. And that was a big game changer. And
It
then
also helped save us those hours on calendars, though, when we could see who knew the knowable information, who was actually reading the new things. We had visibility into that. So we didn't necessarily need to build a training session or get in front of people just to report the news. We had a way to push it out and we could see who was or was not consuming that. So I think that was important visibility for us also.
1,000%. And once you start reporting out on something, like it's adding in accountability, right? And like the moment you introduce accountability, now people are probably a little bit more motivated to stay up to date with things like getting the information that we push out on a weekly basis to catch them up on where business changes have occurred. Moving down to onboarding. So, Amy, I'm gonna have a little laugh with you here in this moment. I feel like we can laugh now at this moment, but
Let's do it.
there's like a little space for a chuckle because I remember really clearly when you came in and you said you want to change our approach to new hire onboarding, and my reaction was like complete shock. Like I've been in this company, for close to a decade at this point. And I was like, this isn't broken. Like we've got other fires going on in other places. Like, why are we fixing this? Like this thing it's
It was
working.
fine.
It's
Everything's
working.
fine.
Everything is fine. Yeah. I mean, our stakeholders were happy. We got the smiley faces, you know what I mean? Like it was a thing that had been working for many, many years. And so, it was a built program, a built machine. But you came in and you said, like, we need to change our approach to it. So here we are. We've got a new leader who wants to take it down to its brass tacks and rebuild it. And honestly, it took me a few months. It wasn't like just in that moment, I was like, oh, like I'm on board. But it really took me a few months to fully understand the why and genuinely appreciate it. But once it clicked, I was completely on board. So if you think about like trying to drive that trust, like it takes a little bit of time, right? But once you have it, I was completely on board. We ended up rebuilding onboarding through a very different lens. It had to be scalable, it had to be predictable, and it had to be repeatable. So scalable, we needed a framework that would work across teams and across geos. Like that started become needing to become table stakes for us. We were supporting a much larger audience size. Predictable, we grounded everything in a learning model. One third presentation, one third application, one third feedback. New hires had a rhythm that they could rely on. And repeatable, this one was huge. If we were going to run a 3-week onboarding program every single month, we had to get smarter about our calorie spend. As an enablement team, we didn't want onboarding to be the only thing we ever did. So we started investing in asynchronous learning, giving new hires the ability to learn on their own time while freeing us to focus on practice coaching and the higher impact work.
I'll take us home on this slide with how we went from this outdated architecture to an optimized seller workflow. So we've said it a few times here, but we were making those pretty slides and we felt really good about getting airtime in front of reps. This also included any time we would train something about systems or processes. And so I remember this shift from making these slides and talking at the audience, thinking that they would remember step 4, 5, and 6 once they got off of the conversation with us. We started doing e-learnings and included knowledge checks and then provided them with their guru resource that they could tap into for a reminder of what that process was. But I think we just started asking some very simple questions and trying to put ourselves in the actual experience of the seller. So like, what is slowing the seller down? Where are they getting stuck? Where are they being asked to make some decisions that they don't even have the context on it? And that's where we started rebuilding this seller workflow with one clear goal: to make sure that sellers could do the right thing the first time. We needed them to spend time in that conversation, really listening to that customer, not scrambling around thinking, where do I need to go next? So instead of asking reps to memorize processes or go hunt for that information, we added in guru knowledge triggers. So in the moment, in time, the rep knew exactly what their next best step was and the action that they needed to take. And that behavior change that we allowed, where now they could spend time focusing on the conversation and not what button they were going to press. When we started seeing that behavior change, that's when those metrics started following, right? You've got to change that behavior. And once you do, then you start seeing the numbers change where you wanted them to the whole time.
Ashley, can I add an example of like
Please.
what I saw you do like in real life? Like a great example of this is like, in some of those knowledge checks, because everything would end with the knowledge check to make sure that like they actually like learn something. They're going to do they absorbed the information and now they're able to do something different. You shifted from, instead of quizzing people on like what's the fourth step on this process, you actually started to quiz them on like, show me how to get to the resource to give you the process. Like how it's not memorization of something. You have the resource in front of you. Now start to change the behavior and shift people into demonstrating that they know how to leverage the resources on hand. And that was like this moment, this light bulb moment that our entire team felt. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's what we need to quiz people on.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that. But I remember it was this moment of, what do I actually need this person that I'm teaching, that I'm trying to get them to understand the concept of this process. What do I need them to walk away from this e-learning knowing? It wasn't what step 4, 5, and 6 were. It was, where do I go when I'm stuck? Or when is the time that I need to actually apply this process? So case studies where we tested them on which process they would apply. It didn't matter if they actually knew steps 1 through 20. They would probably memorize that in time, right? But the end goal was that they understood when they would apply this, and then how, when they forgot what step 15 was, where was their resource to go through it? Well, okay, Cass, I totally forgot about that actually.
And that's why this is such a great conversation. So this was our vision, right? Idealistic. We all have these big ideas, right? But it's how do we make it happen that ultimately matters. So we're just going to talk about four buckets. Time check. We're halfway through our time, friends. Um,
Time flies
Here's
when
what
you're
we
having
did
fun.
first. That it does fly. These are my favorite conversations. The first thing that we had to do was organize for efficiency and scale. So again, when I walked into the business, there was a team that supported new business, a separate team for account management. There was Ashley who served everybody else that was customer facing. And then we had our systems team. So that was how our teams were aligned. But something like onboarding, like we said, took 7 people every month, which kept us from being able to do other strategic work. So the first thing that we had to do, we built a go-to-market team. So there's one person aligned with new business, one person aligned with account management, and one person for customer support, customer success, billing, and collections. Um, 3 people on that team. And then they had partners on the optimization, the systems optimization team. So there were partners. This is what it sounds like in new business, and this is how you do the thing in Salesforce or in our other systems. Same thing for account management. They had their go-to-market counterpart to their systems optimization. Both of those sides of the business reported up to Ashley under all go-to-market enablement. And then anything that we could scale across teams, like a methodology, like new hire onboarding, went over to Cass's team, which was programs. So over there, our knowledge management reported up to Cass, our new hire onboarding. Um, Anything like revenue kickoff, top performer programs, any of those big business-wide initiatives lived under Cass's team. And then I do want to shout out the third person or the fourth person that rounded out this leadership team, Kelsey Roget, who led instructional design because we needed to make sure we were getting eyes on everything to make sure it was instructionally sound. And she built our leader development. So we made sure that we had a dedicated resource to enabling managers to be sure that everything was trickling through the org the way that we needed. The other thing that we did here was we needed to make sure all of us approach things the same way. So again, we had beautiful slides when we were doing training, but everybody on our team got certified in instructional design and in performance consulting so that we knew this recipe that Cass talked about, 1/3 presentation, which is transferring new information, 1/3 application, which was our practice, and 1/3 feedback so that we continue that application feedback loop until we nail it. We had to all think the same way there. And then the second thing that everybody got certified in together was performance consulting, which was our diagnostic framework.
Yep, there it is. So, okay, I'm going to sound like a broken record because we've said this a ton of times, but where were we? Weekly meetings, laundry lists of requests. We said, yep, I'm going to go do that thing. And it felt really good. But the problem with that is we were only solving symptoms. We were never getting to the actual root cause, which meant we were never going to get to the point where we were changing behaviors and we were changing the actual performance, right? And so as a team, we had to really align and make a very clear decision that we were going to stop reacting and start diagnosing. And so we adopted and we also socialized with our stakeholders because if we were going to change the way that we showed up to these meetings, we don't want that to shock our stakeholders. We needed to walk them through how we were going to start approaching conversations when they came to us with, hey, can you do a training for this? Rather than saying, sure, and turning around and going in and create it, we were going to start asking some more questions. But if we just did that without explaining to them, probably would have caused a lot of friction with our stakeholders. So we adopted a diagnostic framework. It's called the 7 factors. I won't go through all of it, but I'm going to tell you what some of those questions sound like when we would start diagnosing when our stakeholders were coming with us. So instead of assuming answers to instead of assuming that the answer to every pain point that our stakeholders were experiencing was training, we started asking questions like, okay, could this be a capacity issue? Is the person that was even hired actually capable of doing this? Or do we have enough people on the team to actually drive this forward? Started asking questions around, okay, do we have the right tools and the conditions for them to be able to set up for to be successful in what they're being asked to do? Do we have standards? Is there documentation? I'd love to see any emojis on how or at any point have you been asked to do a training and you were thinking, what exactly am I being trained to? What am I training? Do we document this? Can you put in front of me what you're actually asking me to do? You have to have those standards in place before you can actually train on something, right? And then we would ask questions like, okay, is this knowledge? Maybe it is a training gap and we do need to come in, but maybe we've actually trained this and we've done a refresher and we've given the guru cards and resources. And now it is that manager feedback loop, right? Or maybe reps weren't incentivized to do a great job. And so we started asking those questions. And again, we aligned with our stakeholders that this was going to be our approach. I mean, think if we just started showing up to these meetings, asking them a lot of questions when the week before we just said yes, like that would have caused friction. But what we found was that a lot of these training requests were actually coaching gaps or unclear standards or a process that we rolled out and it seemed great, but now it's causing confusion. So there's something broken within it. And this really changed how we committed and how we showed up. And we stopped saying yes in the moment. And the conversation shifted to something like this, like, give us a week. I hear what you're saying. We've talked on it a bit. I want to go back, look at some data and make sure we're talking about like the actual problem, the root cause of this problem. And then once we align on the problem, then we can take this next step of what is the right way to solve it. Maybe it's training and maybe it's not. And that's, I think, that really big shift from being those order takers into that strategic thought partner. And we started seeing it. We started being pulled in. I have this problem. Come talk to me about it. And that actually felt much better being pulled in to start about a problem and how we were going to fix it. It felt better than being order takers.
I think a classic one here is when somebody's placing that order for training, you can just ask, did something change or is this something new? And have people performed a standard before? If they haven't ever done it before, then we should teach them how to do it. But if they have done it before and now they're just not anymore, then you've got to look at metrics. Do they know what good looks like? Or motivation and incentive. And that's where we partner with our friends in BizOps or RevOps to help make sure that the incentives are in place to drive this behavior change because it can't just come out of a training, right? If we're having to define the standards, build the training, align on the metrics, and then just hope people are doing it, that's where the manager feedback and making sure that the motivation, that incentive piece doesn't always mean cash, but it means that people need to want to do the same thing. A de-incentivization, de-incentivizing somebody would be a workflow that doesn't work for them, right? They're clicking the buttons and they can't get to where they want to go. So that's the kind of way, if we're incentivizing them because we've built systems and workflows that work and it's easy to do, but they're still not doing it, then we've got to look under the hood and re-diagnose. But this diagnostic framework changed the way that our cross-functional partners viewed working with us because it wasn't just like, yep, when do you need it? Okay, I'll build this training. We'll do it on Friday. Check, check. And then on Monday, you get your new laundry list. Instead, it was we started getting brought into this strategic initiatives when they started so that we could help think across teams. There were unintended consequences of some decisions, but we were uniquely positioned to look across new business and account management when a lot of times decisions were made in silos across those teams. So we became the dot connector and the strategist that was partnering with the business to help solve problems, all because of this framework. And so I feel like this is a really critical piece to our scaling. And that leads me into deploying the right tech stack. We've got to make sure that we've got all the tools to unlock this. So when I came in, um, we were in one Salesforce instance. We were going through a major systems transformation that was big and hard because that's hard. It doesn't matter how well planned you are, that's always going to be hard. But we didn't have a way to really inspect what was going on. So this is where we went out and we understood the needs. We had a diagnostic framework on like, okay, what's the business problem? And then we set out to, okay, if this needs to be solved with conditions, we need to get tooling. That's how we built our business case to go get Guru, which then served the business as our single source of truth. So we needed to point to a pain point, a metric that was causing friction for our reps and build the business case to launch that new tool. And when we approached it that way, when we would put together our buying committees, we would have somebody from each piece of the business sit in there, go through the demos. We would align on like what were the critical features, what were the nice to haves, and we assign point values up front so that then when everybody went through these product demos, we were able to align on what's most important. Everybody could give their ratings, but then we had a really objective way to choose tools where a lot of times it's based on personal preference or hey, this company just sent me a really cool gift box, so like let's go buy that. Those aren't the reasons we want to make decisions. So we've got to make sure that we're choosing the right tools, but also that we've got buy-in from the beginning. So setting up that selection criteria, making sure that our partners across sales and RevOps and everybody across the business that will touch the tool is involved in that decision making. And then we can help build the tech stack that matters. So that was a critical change for us is how we deployed, how we built our business case to ask for the budget, and then how we made sure that we got adoption kind of built in because we proved that we were solving a real business problem when we brought something new in.
And then I would say, probably rounding this out, the last key driver in shifting from reactive to strategic was operating across customer teams, not in silos. And Amy, this was something that you not only like challenged us to think about, but like empowered us to do. Like really like step back and like look at the business at large and let's think about how can we when we do things and implement changes, how can we make sure that that feels frictionless across all of those teams so that our customers are not impacted negatively at the end of the day. So while a customer may interact with multiple teams over their lifetime, those touch points, we want them to feel connected, consistent, and intentional, not fragmented. I'll give you two examples of how we supported this shift. The first one was within knowledge management. Again, I talked about this, but like having like a single source of truth. The one of the main benefits of that is like everyone was accessing the same information from any team. So like we were all using the same stuff. It wasn't like one team over here had their own information and their own processes and their own, talk tracks and things like that. And other teams had completely separate resources for them to leverage as well. So moving to one single place meant we started to actually really clean up and improve consistency across all of the teams. And then we also implemented a single methodology that worked across the entire customer journey. It enabled all of our teams to speak the same language, align on how they approach value-driven conversations, and ultimately collaborate a lot more effectively as the customer moved from one team to the next. Together, I feel like these changes were absolutely instrumental in helping us move from team-specific execution to customer-centric strategic enablement.
Double clicking on that methodology piece. So often we talk about sales methodology, which is all that pre-sales before the contract is signed. And it feels like such a miss for businesses when we don't pull that same language through. Just because you run discovery and new business doesn't mean that an account manager or somebody in that post-sale flow shouldn't be asking the same questions and double checking like what's changed in the business so that then we can run discovery again if we need to. They might have different goals, they might have different problems than when they bought. And if we're not thinking about that through the entire customer journey, we really risk having churn. And one of the biggest levers for revenue growth is protecting the customers that you have. So the more that we can mitigate churn, hang on to folks, but it's part of that like really mapping across the entire customer journey that makes that critical. Because if we're only really teaching selling skills or a sales methodology to the pre-sales team, imagine how much friction your customer is going to feel as they continue to interact with you and probably ultimately churn. So what we can do is look at success metrics across all of the teams that we support and make sure that we're helping protect all of that business, not just thinking pre-sales. Anything else, ladies, on this part? Because I am going to throw you a question that was not planned.
Totally fine. You kind of took the words out of my mouth about when we were talking about operating across all customer facing teams. The real like end output, I guess, if you will, of doing that was the benefit to our customers because it started reducing that friction because before we did that, everybody was having the different conversations with the same vendors. But then as we started thinking across teams and rolled out that sales methodology, the conversation, while it was still different, it started to sound similar and that reduced the friction that our customers were actually feeling.
It's a great point. And I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to come back to my question on this slide if we have time. Um, so what we want to talk about is the finish line at the end of this 2 years. Again, we want to put a bookend at the end so you can see the pendulum and how far we were able to drive this. So what did it look like in the end? Um, Ladies, I'll kick it over to either of you.
Oh yeah. Okay. So we grew the team, 17 people, but we were only able to do that. We had to make a business case, right? You can't just say we need to hire more people, especially when we were at a place at the beginning where we weren't actually driving performance. We weren't changing behaviors. We weren't driving performance. When we started to do that, the ask for more people on the team became a very clear yes. And we then adopted that motto of scalable, predictable, repeatable. If we're being asked to do something, we have to think about it in a way of how is this going to scale? Because we were in a place where we went from being just US focused to now we were global across 16 countries and 4 continents. Cass, anything to add there? I don't want to steal all the thunder.
I just I just feel so personally so proud of it. I mean, just to I got to see this evolution just come to life and like, you know, I remember when enablement used to be a team of three. To get to this is just absolutely amazing. But I really want to underscore what you said. We had to prove the value and then you start getting more. You know what I mean? We started getting more not only for teams, but for tools. We got a lot of budget for tools that we never had before because we're able to start to advocate for what the business truly needed. Okay, diagnostic framework, let's come to life here. We're able to identify what's the real thing that we need. And then we're able to advocate, whether that was tools, whether that was people. We ended up being able to grow in both ways. And it was something I'm really personally proud to have witnessed.
Well, and I
When
think a meaningful thing to add here is that the way that we grew wasn't just in asking for more headcount, it was the business giving us their headcount. So we got 3 people from the international org. We supported North America. When we moved to supporting the global org, 3 people came with that change so that we could scale geos, time zones, languages that all of us supporting the US weren't able to do. And then the real game changer for me, this was really exciting, was our senior vice president of sales in North America was like, you know what? We need sales quality assurance. And this was how we were able to pinpoint the metrics that helped prove what was working and what wasn't. So sales QA was a game changer because not just looking across calls with like Gong trackers. We were able to pull fields from Salesforce, fields from Gong, mix them up in Gemini through a Gemini gem, and prove that when people followed our methodology, they were X% more likely to hit quota. So when they didn't follow our methodology, they were hitting around 68% of quota. Once we had our methodology in place, if people followed it through discovery, there was a over time, right? Over 90 days, if they were doing this on 70% of their calls, then we were hitting 80 something percent to quota. But if they followed the methodology all the way through the sales funnel, people were achieving consistently 112% of quota. So being able to point to those metrics gives the business a reason to believe in the things that we're doing. Now, it took us getting through, we knew we wanted to move these needles, but having that proof point that over time, when people adopted the things we were asking them to adopt, we had real business impact.
I want to tap into that a little bit more, Amy, because I think our goals, our enablement goals, they were the same as sales, right? Like your CROs, they got to hit their number. I've got to help you. We have the same goal. We share the goal. We share the metrics. We're all driving towards the same thing. And that simplified things a lot, right? When you think about planning for your OKRs, enablement did not need to be over here thinking about what metric do we need to get to? Where are we trying to go? As a company, where were we trying to go? And we were all in it together. It mattered to all of us. Teams should not have their separate goals and metrics. We should all be marching towards that same end goal. Maybe how we get there looks different on each team, but I think that alignment on let's not have individual goals. How are we going to measure all of those things that were done? Let's align on a commonality. And now we're in this together. We can serve as your strategic thought partner, but your goal is my goal. And that I think, and I know we're going to go a little bit more into the trust here, but that started to unlock trust with our stakeholders because their number and that pressure was also ours.
When we stopped asking business leaders how many scorecards their team filled out in Gong, and instead we were able to say, hey, when they do this, they're achieving quota at this percent. And then their question would be, okay, then who's not doing it? Right? Because that was quota achievement versus number of scorecards. So just shifting that conversation helped establish this foundation of trust, not just within our team, but across all the stakeholders that we supported in the business. So that was a really critical shift when we were able to start pointing at the business metrics that mattered to them. Anything else here before we bring it home with my last question for you all?
Bring it home. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. We've only got a couple minutes.
Is
So
everyone
I'm
still
going to
awake?
not share the
Can we
screen.
get some emojis really quick, Amy? Is everyone still here? Are we having fun? Okay. Okay, now we can move
Love
on.
it. Love it, love it, love it. All the
Amazing.
emojis.
And I can't see the emojis when I'm sharing my screen. So here, we're not going to share anymore for the rest of it. Cass, Ashley, what did you learn on this journey, or like, what are you most proud of at this point? Like, if you were to give me your 1 minute reflection on this journey we went on together.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll go for it. I the mantra of scalable, predictable, repeatable is something I will take with me anywhere I go. I think it is now like core to what I believe, how I like the lens I look through. So I'm so appreciative that like you brought it to us and you anchored us around that day in and day out. Um, Amy, I have to acknowledge that I have so much gratitude for you helping us do the hard things. Because to be scalable, predictable, repeatable, like that's not easy. Like that's a concept. And so all of us in this room together, enablement professionals, like we all talk about like aspirations, like we want measurable impact and we want to be strategic partners and to do all these things. None of those things are easy. So you really helped us commit to doing the hard things. But it really was baby step by baby step, brick by brick. So I just wanted to like, when I kind of sit back and reflect, like, yes, that's the mantra that I will always continue to anchor on, but I want to like put those two bookends on each side of it of trust comes first. You have to have trust before you can do anything different than status quo. You have to have trust with your stakeholders. You have to have trust with your team. So then you can try to approach work through repeatable, predictable approaches. And then you've got to measure on the back end. So when you measure that impact It completely changes the value that we are now associated to. And that gives us free reign. And now we start seeing this like virtuous cycle. Like now it's able to kind of be on like rinse and repeat. So I will take that with me and again, really, really appreciative and thrilled to have um, been a part of this journey because your leadership set the tone and completely revolutionized how we thought about enablement and how we actually raised the bar to the standard of enablement we held ourselves to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Say more. No, I'm kidding. Ashley.
I I think for me, the biggest takeaway is, and you've got to slow down sometimes to be able to speed up. You can get caught up running on a hamster wheel. I'm guilty of it too. If I'm not doing something and I don't feel productive, but oftentimes you need to take that pause to really look at what is the end goal of what we're trying to do? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And often within that problem, there's other things happening around. What's the reality of where are we? So take that moment, step back, regain alignment if you need to. If you think that the problem is something and your stakeholders think it's something else, and you start solutioning, you're going to have to rebuild. And actually, you're going to have wasted time. So be okay with like, ooh, I'm not sure where we're going to go. Because if you haven't actually figured out the problem, then of course you shouldn't know where you're going to go. So that moment of just pause, reflection, maybe grabbing some peers, grabbing your boss, grabbing your stakeholders and like talking through it. Maybe I'm not typing, maybe I'm not looking up data, but I'm just having conversations until we get there. And then we can prioritize our next steps of how to actually fix that. But if we didn't land on the right root cause or the problem, we're never going to be able to tie it to that performance or that behavior change. So slowing down to speed up will stay with me.
I got to double click on that for 1 second. And I know that we're getting close on time. I'll be really brief, but I just want to say, Ashley, like talking about superpowers earlier, like that is one of yours. And when you do share the same goals and share the same motivations, people appreciate the questions. You asking to slow down, people end up actually discovering more information sometimes by answering those questions because sometimes they don't have answers to those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps them think it through too. So when we are all working towards the same goals, these questions are also shared opportunities to learn together and make sure that we are tackling the right things, focusing on the right priorities. It's difficult for everyone. So we all want to accomplish that at the end of the day.
To your
And
point, you've got
I'll
to have
bring
that
us,
trust.
Yeah.
Because if
I
I
was
start
going to
asking you
say,
Yeah.
questions, right? I start just asking you questions and I don't have that trust, I'm putting my defense up. I'm like, why are you coming at me? I mean, it's the same in a discovery conversation. If you don't let the buyer know you're going to ask them some questions or you want to get to know them and you just start blazing at them, they're going to get defensive. It's the same with our stakeholders.
Yep.
and we had a lot of hard conversations in small rooms, right? Me with each of you, us together, like we had to work through things. But part of the way of building that trust is we were always upfront and candid. We said the things that needed to be said directly to one another. And then when we were working across stakeholders, we were aligned and we were more equipped and had thought through more angles so that we had more intelligent conversations with our cross-functional stakeholders. But we built trust in those moments that were hard. It wasn't in all the high fives. It was traipsing across 3 continents and 6 countries together over a 12-month span as we're scaling new teams and new geos. Like we did really hard things, but the business kept putting that on us because we earned it and they trusted us. So it's not just that we built the trust together. And y'all, this is my dream team. These are the women I would take with me in any trench in any place in the world. So thank you. Um, there were questions that came up that we didn't get to answer. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're there a lot, so happy to answer questions there. Timmy, you've got your 30 seconds left that you asked for.
Wonderful. Thank you. So again, just a massive thank you to our panelists, Amy, Ashley, Cassandra. I have dropped their links again in the chat so you can connect with them virtually. And then events like this, come together when we have members from the Enablement Squad raising their hand. So if you are interested in hosting a webinar, publishing a blog post, being a guest on our soon to launch podcast in 2026, please fill out the link that I just dropped in the chat. And with that, we will end today's session. Go enjoy the remainder of your 2025, and we will see you in 2026.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for
Thanks,
having us.
everyone.
Thank you.